Hello, welcome to Craig Loves to Crochet. Today's tutorial is going to be in 3 parts and I'm going to show you how to create this gorgeous stitch. It's called the Peacock Eye Stitch and it's created in a different way than we're used to, but I'll talk you through that. But it makes this most classy, gorgeous pattern here. I absolutely adore it. So I'll just introduce you to the various parts first of all, and then we'll get on with the tutorial. Right, so the first part of the tutorial is going to be showing you 3 variants of the stitch. So this swatch here actually shows you the stitch, the traditional way of crocheting the Peacock Eye Stitch. This swatch here shows how we crochet the stitch but into the back of the stitch, which creates these ridges here. And finally this swatch here shows you the variant of the stitch crocheted into the stitch in the front of the stitch, leaving this like little raised kind of stitches here. So I'll show you how to do those 3 variants in the first tutorial, and that's where we'll really get to grips with the stitch and learn how to create the stitch. The second part of the tutorial is looking at using the stitch and increasing and decreasing using the stitch. So here I have a swatch to show that example of how we've increased the stitch as we've gone up and then decreased it again. And that's very useful when we're wanting to make little waistcoats or hats, or decrease when we're doing like a shoulder or something on a garment. The third part of the tutorial is really the fun part, where I've been experimenting and having a bit of fun with the stitch, and I'm going to share that with you. So this first swatch here shows you how I've created the basic stitch at the bottom here, and then I've created 2 clusters on top of each stitch and then gone back to the 1 cluster at the top. So we're looking at clustering the various clusters of the stitch. This swatch here is probably my favourite variation of the stitch. I don't think I've made a new stitch, but I've definitely changed it a little bit. And on this stitch what I've done is I've used the stitch and I've twisted it to the left. So it's a left twist stitch, and on this swatch here is a right twist swatch of the stitch. A full twist and a half twist as well. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and it really creates the most gorgeous patterns. Right, so let's get on with our tutorial, the first part. Right, for this stitch what we'll need is our crochet hook, whatever size you want, and whatever size the pattern requires of you. But also we'll need a rather large knitting needle, and this one here is a 20mm. This one was one I picked up from a haberdashery craft shop ages ago. But you can use any kind of wooden dowel or any kind of sort of pole-like item. So let's get started then. So when we're starting this stitch, we always work the stitch in groups of 3, 4, 5 or 6 usually, and over the course of these 3 parts I will be actually showing you the variation of each of those size clusters. But for us today we're going to be doing it for now in groups of 5. So we're going to cast on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I am assuming that you know how to cast on 3, 4, 5. I'll just check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. So that's 2 lots of cluster. 3, 4, 5. 3 lots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I think that's probably about right. I'll just check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Right. Now what I'm going to do, so I've got my 4 sets of 5. I'm going to cast on 1 more, because we need to do our foundation chain. It is quite important to do a foundation chain for this stitch, so it gives it something to work off. So, oops, if we single crochet all the way along to the end. Now, just a little tip, when I'm creating a foundation row, I always go into the 2 loops. So, and it really makes an absolutely solid, lovely, neat edge for whatever piece of work you're going to continue in. So, I'm going to see you at the end of this, because I'm assuming that you know how to do this part. Okay, so we have our foundation chain, a chain of 20, and now we're going to start the first part of the stitch. So you can see here I've got a little loop here, so we need to pull that loop out. But before I do anything with that, I just want to quickly show you the chain itself. So we have this loop here. This is going to be our first loop. We're going to work the next stitch on this stitch here. So this is our first one, this loop here. So when we pull our next loop through, it's going to be taking our needle, our crochet hook, all the way through these 2 loops and pulling the yarn through there. And then we're going to go all the way down each one of these here, pulling our loops up through each one of these here, just in case you can't see it as well once I use the needle. So what we need to do is we need to take our needle, our large needle or wooden dowel or whatever you're going to use, and pop that over the loop over there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to catch. So we have our foundation chain here. We're going to catch hold of the yarn, pull it through the 2 loops and pop that over the top of our needle. And we're going to go into the 3rd stitch along, going to pick up our yarn, pull it through and onto our needle. We're going to do this all the way along until we have 20 loops on our needle, pulling the loops up as you go. Now I have to say this is a little awkward when you first start out and you do need to get into your rhythm, but once you get into a rhythm it's really quite easy to do. You do need to keep a little check that your stitches are not too tight, so every now and then just pull them along like you're pulling up socks, like so, just so that they're all evenly sized as well, and then just carry on pulling your loops all the way through like so, popping them onto your needle. Almost there. Just pulling them along so that they don't all bunch up at the top, otherwise we'll have a bit of a queue. Okay. It is quite handy to hold your needle, either tuck it into your tummy, or I usually rest it on my tummy so that I can work just with the top end of the needle. But whatever suits you really, you'll find your own comfortable way of doing it. Just coming to the ends, the last couple of stitches, like so, and the last one here. Right, so we have all our stitches. I just need to pull them up. You can loosen them up a little bit if you want to, so they all fit on. Okay, so now we have all our stitches, all our loops on our needle. Now then, the next part we need to do, or the next thing we need to do, is to slip all the stitches off. Don't worry about this part, they won't come undone or anything. Put your needle away for a minute, and then we're just going to be working on these loops. So like I said, we're going to be working in clusters of 5 for this demonstration, so we need to pick up our first 5 loops. That's 5 there. These loops here will not be going anywhere, so please don't worry about those. They're not going to undo or anything, they're quite secure. So what we're going to do is we pull it nice and taut so that we've got an even length for each of the loops. We're going to pick up our yarn, we're going to pull it through all 5 loops, and we're going to make a single crochet like so. Now we're going to chain 2, and the reason for that is because I'm going to continue in double crochets. So now we have all 5 loops connected with our single crochet and 2 chains. Now then, if you have a look here, you can see that there's a little, where the loops are, there's like a little hole here where they all connect, and this is where we're going to work our stitches. So if we have 5 loops, then we need to be working 5 double crochets or whatever stitch you want to work into those loops. So I'm going to do double crochet, so I'm going to work another 4 in, because our chain counts as 1 stitch, so that's 2, 3, 4. It's really easy, isn't it? 5. Okay, so that is our first stitch created. So that's our first peacock eye stitch. Now we need to pick up the next 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. So we do the same with these 5 stitches. But what we're going to do, so we hold them nice and taut. What we're going to do here is we're going to pull our yarn all the way through. We're going to single crochet to connect the 2 clusters together, but we're not going to do our chain on this one. We only do that on the very first one. We're going to work 5 clusters, 5 double crochets into this cluster, and again through the little hole here. So you can see the hole where we work our 5 double crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 2 more to go, because we should have 10 loops. So we're going to pick up our next 5 loops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold them nice and taut again. Pull our yarn through, making our single crochet to connect them together, and then in our space here that we're getting to know now, we're going to work our 5 double crochets again. So, oops, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we're nearly finished, so just need to pick up our final 5 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our final 5 loops, nice and taut, pulling our yarn through, making our single crochet to connect them all, and then in our space here, just here, we're going to work our 5 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and finally 5. Right, so pull that out. So there you can see we have our 4 beautiful, beginning of our peacock stitch. So 4 beautiful peacock stitches. They're absolutely gorgeous, aren't they? I really love this stitch. Okay, so we would continue like that. So we're going to pull up our loops again. So we're going to be pulling up our loops in groups of 5. So 5 loops across here. We don't pull up the single crochet. So do you recall when we made our single crochet to connect each one of the clusters? We do not pull up through that one. We only want to pull up through the double crochets. So we're going to pull our loops up through there. And I'm going to, oops, sorry for going across the camera there. And I'm going to show you how to create the next variation of this stitch. So as we did before, we're going to be putting our needle through the first loop. That counts as our first stitch, and we're going to be pulling up our loops again. So pulling up our second loop through the second double crochet, but this time, oops, I've done that wrong. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through the back of the loop only. So just so we'll take a little look here at the stitch. Let's move this one out of the way. We're going to go, so you have your 2 stitches here, 1, 2 here. For this stitch, for this variation, the second variation, we're going to be just going into the back loop, okay, and that will create this lovely ridge that I showed you in the swatch. So we're going to go into the back. So we have our first loop already on. So now we're going to go into the back of our second double crochet, and we're going to put that loop over our needle, and we're going to go into the back of the stitch and pulling up and onto our needle to the back of our stitch, pulling up onto our needle, and we're going to do that all the way along, but just in the back of the stitch. So we're going to miss this single crochet here. That's a single crochet. We're going to miss that one, and we're going to go into this stitch here, into the back of that stitch, and onto our needle again, into that stitch, onto the needle, back of that stitch, onto the needle. It does get easier the more you progress through your work as well, I find. It's a lot harder to show you on camera than it is to actually do it. So I'm just going to pull these up, right? So we're back to our single crochet again here. So we're going to miss this one here, and we're going into the back of this stitch. Oops. and it's just this slight variation in working the loops that actually gives us a variation in pattern. So for this one, if you recall when I showed you the swatch, it was a lovely, it made a lovely little ridge, which is really pretty if that's what you're wanting in your design or your pattern. So we're going to miss this single crochet here, and we're going to be working our stitches. We're going to work 4 stitches along, so into the back of the loops, into our 4 stitch until we come to the end where we'll come to our chain. So we have our 4 loops on here. So this is our 4th one here. Right, now we have, if you can see, our chain here, and we need to be working into the top of our chain. So if we can try and work into the back stitch, that would be even more handy, but let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see the chain. So if you can see the chain here, it's just here, so we have 1, 2, 3. We're going to work into the top of this little stitch here. So if I go into the other side, you'll be able to see what I mean. I just try and get my needle through. Right, so we're going to be working into this stitch here. I went off camera there, sorry. So we're going to be working into this loop here, putting our crochet hook through and pulling our yarn through. And there we have it. Just zoom back out again so you can see. Right, so we have all of our loops on our needle here, and now what we're going to do is we're going to work exactly the same way as we did before. So we're going to pull all our stitches off. We're going to pick up our first 5 loops. So here they are. Don't need to do anything other than just working exactly the way we have done in the previous row. So keeping our loops really taut, going to pull through and a single crochet to secure the cluster. For the first cluster only, we're going to chain, if you remember. That creates our first stitch, and we're going to be working into this space here, our 5 double crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, just to refresh your memory when we're picking up our next lot of loops, so we're going to pick up our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops again, nice and taut, pulling our yarn all the way through the loops, creating our single crochet. And if you recall, that connects our clusters together, our group of clusters together. Right, so I'm going to continue all the way along now, doing my 5 double crochets into each space, and I'll see you at the end and we'll do our final variation of this stitch. Right, so I've come to the end. So you can see that when we work into the back of the stitch using this technique, we create this lovely ridge here, and that's seems to accent the stitch, which is absolutely beautiful. Right, the third variation is where we're going to be working into the front of the stitch. So just like before, we have our stitches here. So we've worked through both loops, we've worked through the back, and now we're going to work through this front, just this front loop here, and that will create a lovely little raised stitch or a raised version of the Peacock Eye Stitch. So the same as before, I'm going to pick up our loops, but the way we pick up our loops is going to be through the front of the stitch rather than the back. So pick up our loop from the front of the stitch, put it onto our needle, putting our hook through the front of the stitch, picking up the yarn and pulling it through the front of the stitch and hooking it onto our needle, picking our loop up through the front of the stitch and putting it over our needle. Our single crochet, if you recall from the last time, and we'll continue into the next lot of clusters, picking up from the front of the stitch, just the one loop. Right, so I'm going to see you at the end when I've picked up all my loops now from the front of the stitch, and we'll continue accordingly. Right, so I have my 19 loops on my needle, and we need to pick up our last loop in the top of the chain. So this time we're going to go through the front of the loop of the chain. So we pick up our yarn through the front of the loop, and there we have our 20 loops on our needle. Okay, so now we're going to do what we always do. You'll be used to this now. Slip off all our loops, oops, and we're going to pick up our 5 loops to make our first cluster. So the last time I'm going to show you this, so pulling our yarn through the group 5 clusters and making a single crochet, chain 2, and working our 5 double crochets into our space here. Right, I'm going to see you at the end when we get to the end, and that will be almost the end of our tutorial. Right, so that's the end of the last row. So those are the 3 variations of the Peacock Eye Stitch, into the 2 loops, the back of the loop and front of the loop, to create variations of the stitch. I'm going to share with you a lovely design that I've made specifically for this stitch, a tutorial. So if you give me 2 minutes, I'll get it. Okay, so just quickly, this is my design, the design I've made using the Peacock Eye Stitch. It's a beautiful little neckerchief. It's gorgeous for little people as well as adults. It's such a classy little item, this, perfect for our English springs, but it's quite a lightweight garment, this, and the stitch, the lace, makes it so beautiful. And basically it's fastened with, it should have 3 buttons on, so when we do it we'll have 3 buttons on, and it's a little neckerchief or a little cowl for us to use our skills that we've just learnt of our Peacock Eye Stitch. So thank you very much for watching Craig Loves to Crochet. My name is Tonya. I would love it if you followed me on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Craig Loves to Crochet. If you've really found this tutorial helpful, if you could push the like button, that would be really great for me, just to get some feedback. But thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.